Maybe you've never said it out loud, but you've felt it deep inside. I gave everything and still he wants more. It might be that this thought comes when the phone rings, and you already know that on the other end, there won't be a "how are you?" but another demand disguised as urgency. Maybe he says it's just for a while, that he'll pay it back, that he's trying, but deep down, you feel it's not help he wants. It's your exhaustion. It's your guilt. It's your fear of saying no. When love starts coming with a bill, it's no longer love. It's manipulation. There are fathers and mothers who have already walked this path, who signed for loans without realizing they were mortgaging their peace, who sold their car, their home, their jewelry, and then heard nothing but silence. There was no gratitude, no acknowledgement, only the weight of a void that money can't fill. Maybe you know someone like that. Maybe you are someone like that. And that is not weakness. It's a story. It's love poorly repaid. It's care that became emotional debt. Imagine a father who sold his car to pay off his son's debts. He told himself, he's my son, he needs me. After that, he didn't even get a visit, not a single phone call, just the echo of promises of care that never came. He expected affection, he received absence. He expected companionship, he received distance. And still, for a long time, he thought it was his fault. You might be living something similar. Maybe you're afraid of being alone. Maybe you think that if you stop helping, you'll lose the little connection that still remains. Maybe you're asking yourself, am I the one who's wrong? The answer may hurt, but it can also free you. It's not wrong to set boundaries. It's not wrong to preserve the little piece you have left. The son who manipulates often knows exactly where to touch. He doesn't raise his voice. He speaks softly. He says it's just this once. He promises to take care of you later, but he doesn't take care. He never takes care, because deep down he doesn't want to care. He wants control. He wants access. He wants you to feel guilty for not giving everything. And when you do give everything, he disappears. It's hard to accept, but affection in this kind of relationship has become currency. The I love you comes after the money transfer. The hug comes along with the list of bills. And the phrase "you mean everything to me" comes on the day the credit card is due. This is not love. This is dependency. This is emotional abuse disguised as need. Freud would explain this by saying there's an unconscious transference happening, a reversal of emotional roles that traps parents in the illusion that, if they just help a little more, maybe the son's love will return. But what comes back, most of the time, is just another demand, another expectation that isn't yours, another burden that was never meant to be on your shoulders. It takes courage to see this clearly, courage to admit that what looked like care was actually control, that what looked like love was actually domination, that what looked like protection was actually a prison. Many parents feel guilty just thinking about this. They think they're being selfish. They think they're failing. But the truth is simple. Someone who truly loves does not demand sacrifice. Someone who truly loves doesn't threaten with absence. Someone who truly loves doesn't turn affection into a debt. This introduction is the first step, a silent invitation to clarity, a call for you to look at your own story with more compassion and begin to realize that maybe what you called love was actually your own surrender, with no return, no reciprocity, no rest. You deserve rest. You deserve peace, even if he says otherwise, even if he calls it abandonment, even if no one else understands. You are still worthy of respect, still worthy of love, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop paying for a love that never arrives. He didn't ask for everything at once. He asked for a little. He asked carefully. He asked with emotion. Dad, it's just this month. Mom, I swear I'll pay it back. You've got a little saved up, don't you? And you wanted to believe, because that's what love is, right? Being available, being support, being a refuge. But little by little, that request that seemed like an exception became routine, and the routine became obligation, and the obligation became guilt. With each new demand, you gave in, not because you had it, but because you didn't want to lose the little love that still remained in that relationship. This is the start of the toxic bond. Love as currency, money as proof. You don't want to say no. You don't want to be seen as someone who turned their back. So you pay. You pay to avoid the yelling. You pay to keep the connection. You pay to avoid being called heartless. But the real cost isn't in the bank account. It's in the heart. It's in the tired body. It's in the soul that begins to wonder, is that the only reason he comes to me? Freud would tell us here about the power of the superego, that internal voice that makes us want to be the ideal father, the perfect mother, the one who gives without limits, even when the child no longer offers affection, only demands. And the more the superego tightens, the more guilt grows. You think, I have more than he does. It's fair to help. He's just starting his life. I've already lived mine. If I don't help, he'll grow distant. And so, without realizing it, the son becomes the judge. And you, the defendant of your own generosity. Maybe you remember a specific moment, a loan you co-signed without really understanding, a credit card that ended up in his hands, money that vanished and was never mentioned again. Maybe at the time it seemed normal. After all, it was just help. But now, looking back, you feel it. Something broke there. And the worst part, you didn't have the courage to name it as abuse, because naming it would be too painful. It would be admitting that the one you raised, the one you gave so much to, is hurting you. And the pain of that realization is worse than any debt. But denying it doesn't protect him. It only hurts you more. And the cycle continues. He asks, you give in, he disappears, you feel guilty. He comes back, asks again, promises to change, and doesn't. He never changes. This process is silent. It doesn't arrive with scandal. It comes with sweet words, with childhood memories, with, you've always helped me, with, you're the only one who believes in me. And you believe, because you still want to believe. But there comes a moment when belief must give way to clarity, because true love does not demand constant sacrifice. Healthy love doesn't make you a hostage of your own kindness. If you feel like you're paying to keep a bond, maybe that bond broke a long time ago. And that's not weakness. It's reality. It's clarity. It's the beginning of emotional recovery. You can acknowledge abuse without ceasing to love. You can set boundaries without ceasing to be a father or mother. You can protect yourself, even if he says that's selfish. Many parents realize it too late, when the house is already sold, when their name is already ruined, when the phone only rings on the due date. But there's still time to change. There's still time to wake up. There's still time to say, I love you, but I can't keep funding this endless hole. And that sentence, as harsh as it may sound, might be the most loving one you've ever said. For yourself, for your health, for your peace. You don't fail by saying no. You fail when you forget that you also deserve care. And care begins when you recognize that love can't be bought, nor charged, nor imposed with blackmail. True love doesn't come with a bill. You spent your entire life working, woke up early when no one else wanted to get out of bed, paid bills, held the household together, gave up on your own desires. And when the time finally came to breathe, to live more calmly, to have peace, he came with debts, promises, urgencies. Suddenly, your retirement became the source of a new cycle, to pay, to support, to fund, to maintain. And the rest that should have been well-deserved became a new journey of emotional servitude. There are sons and daughters who, even as adults, remain emotional children. They expect everything, demand everything, and recognize nothing. They say they're overwhelmed but shift the weight onto their parents. They say they're tired, but drain the energy of those who have already lived so much. They say they have no way out but don't take a single step on their own. And parents, in the attempt to maintain the bond, enter a silent game where love is confused with obligation. This is the cycle of family inversion. When the child should protect, he demands. When he should support, he charges. When he should be grateful, he ignores. And the parents, out of fear of breaking the bond, keep giving until there's nothing left. No money, no health, no identity. Only the feeling that old age has become an endless installment plan. Freud would call this an emotional regression. The child reverts emotionally to an infantile state, but with power, and that power settles in the parent's fear of being discarded. The child senses this, maybe not consciously, but he does, and he uses it. He uses the fear of loneliness. He uses guilt. He uses exhaustion, and with each new favor, he reinforces the idea that parents exist to serve him. Not as an act of gratitude, but as an acquired right. Maybe you've already sold something valuable for him. Maybe you skipped buying medicine, delayed medical exams, closed the fridge door on emptiness just to make sure he wouldn't go without. And maybe, even so, you still heard criticism, coldness, indifference. Love became conditional. If you don't help me, don't count on me anymore. And the pain of hearing that cuts deeper than any financial demand. Many parents fall into a state of silent depression, not because of age, but because of the feeling of emotional uselessness. They feel that if they're not providers, they're no longer important. They feel their worth is tied to how much they can give, and that makes them sick. That isolates them, that empties them. But the truth is different. You don't need to sustain a relationship for it to exist. You don't need to pay to be loved. You don't need to keep giving up on yourself just to keep someone close, because in the end, that's not presence. It's pressure. It's not care. It's demand. It's not connection. It's dependency. You deserve to live your old age with dignity. You deserve to drink a cup of coffee without fearing the next request. You deserve to look at your bank balance without feeling shame. You deserve to sleep without mentally going over someone else's debts. You've already done more than enough. You've already given more than you could. And now, maybe it's time to give something to yourself. Saying no might seem harsh. It might seem like abandonment. It might seem ungrateful. But it's not. It's protection. It's respect for everything you've built. It's the chance to start a new phase, where your peace is worth more than the approval of someone who only shows up to ask. It's when no becomes a yes. To you, to your health, to your freedom. You are still worthy of love, even if he never says thank you, even if he calls it selfishness, even if the world doesn't understand, because deep down you know, the love that must continue is the love for yourself. You remember exactly what you gave. You remember how much it cost. You remember the effort, the hard choice, the sleepless night. You remember the conversation that came before that gesture. You remember saying, "This is the last time." You remember doing it with love, with hope, with that quiet feeling that maybe now he would understand. But what came afterward was silence. There was no thank you. There was no hug. There wasn't even acknowledgement that it had been a sacrifice. That absence of gratitude isn't just bad manners. It's a sign, a warning. When a son or daughter doesn't recognize a parent's effort, it reveals that they don't see the other as a separate person. To them, you are an extension, a financial, emotional, functional extension. And extensions don't need thanks. They simply exist to serve. Freud would call this relational narcissism, an emotional structure where the other only matters as long as they fulfill a need. And when they no longer do, they are discarded. Many parents feel this but don't have the courage to name it. They think it's an overreaction, resentment, or drama, but it's not. It's real, and it's painful, because what hurts isn't just the money. What hurts is the invalidation. What hurts is realizing that even after everything, you're still not seen. This silent trauma of not being validated eats away inside. It's when you ask yourself, did he notice what I did? Does she understand how much it hurt to do that for her? And the answer often is no. No, he didn't notice. No, she didn't understand. No, they didn't care. And that destroys an invisible part of the soul. The place where you just wanted to be seen as someone who loves, not someone who serves. As the years go by, the aging brain tends to tolerate more, tends to avoid conflict, tends to seek harmony. But that search for peace, when used against you, becomes a breeding ground for abuse. You swallow the hurt. You smile on the outside. You pretend it didn't sting, but the body knows. The heart knows. The memory holds on. And one day, the pain comes back. In the silence of the house, in the absence of a phone call, in the lack of a loving gesture. Many parents at this point go quiet. They prefer not to bring it up. They prefer to forget. But what is not said keeps hurting. And that's why we need to talk. We need to acknowledge that the thank you that never came is not a detail. It's a wound. And every wound needs care, not with more sacrifice, but with truth, with clarity, with boundaries. You are not ungrateful for wanting to be acknowledged. You are not selfish for expecting a gesture of affection. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for the basics, respect. And when that doesn't come, it's necessary to accept that maybe the love you gave can no longer be given the same way. Because love without return turns into exhaustion. And no one deserves to grow old exhausted. You can still love, but you need to protect yourself. You can still care, but you need to be cared for. You can still want closeness, but you need truth. And truth, in this case, starts with a sentence many parents are afraid to say. I noticed you didn't say thank you, and that hurt me. Saying this won't change the other, but it changes you. It lifts the weight of silence. It frees you from guilt. It gives voice to your pain. You deserve to be recognized, not for what you give, but for who you are. And if that doesn't come from the one you love most, let it at least come from yourself. Look in the mirror, see what you've done, see how much you've given, and say calmly, I deserve gratitude, even if it never comes from others, because inside, I know my worth. There is a moment that marks a silent turning point in many families. The day when a father or mother for the first time says, I can't. It's not an aggressive no. It's not a no out of unwillingness. It's a tired no, a necessary no, a no that comes after so many sacrificial yeses. But that no changes everything. because it reveals what was previously hidden, that the love in that relationship was conditional, and the condition was money. Many parents report the same pattern. All it takes is setting a boundary and the child disappears. Disappears suddenly, disappears without warning, disappears as a form of punishment. The phone stops ringing, the messages stop coming, the visits vanish, and in place of the bond, a heavy silence appears, full of unspoken pressure. That silence isn't absence, it's blackmail. It's a way of saying, if you don't give me what I want, you don't deserve my presence. It's hard to accept this, because the parent still tries to justify it. He must be busy. She got upset, but it'll pass. Maybe I was too harsh. But deep down, the pain starts to hit. What if he only came to me out of interest? What if the affection I believed in was just an illusion sustained while I was useful? Freud would speak here of the collapse of transference, when the image of the parent no longer occupies that sacred place in the child's mind and becomes seen only as a means, a tool, a resource. And when the resource fails, the affection fails too. The love disappears with the money. And what remains is loneliness, the cruelest kind of all, the kind that comes after you've given everything. Maybe you've lived that moment. Maybe you said, I can't, with a heavy heart, hoping for understanding that never came. Maybe you sat in the living room waiting for the phone call that didn't come. And when it didn't, you understood. The bond wasn't what it seemed. The tie that held you was, in fact, a transaction. And when the transaction couldn't happen, you were left behind. That hurts. It hurts more than any financial crisis. It hurts more than any sacrifice. It hurts because it strikes at the center of identity. You spent your life being a father, being a mother, and suddenly being a parent is no longer enough. Now you have to pay. Now you have to provide. Now you have to prove, with assets, with transfers, with favors. And when you stop giving, you stop mattering. But here's a truth that must be said. You haven't lost your worth. The one who loses is the one who doesn't see, the one who ignores, the one who disappears in the face of a boundary, the one who turns a no into punishment. You didn't fail by saying no. You protected yourself. You took a step. You showed that there is still a person there with needs, with exhaustion, with dignity. That realization may seem harsh. It may feel like the end. But often it's the beginning of a new perspective, the beginning of a new kind of relationship, even if it's with yourself, the beginning of rebuilding your emotional autonomy, because someone who is only present while receiving was never truly there. You may feel longing, you may feel guilt, you may feel doubt. All of that is normal, but don't forget one thing. True love does not disappear in the face of a boundary. It adapts, it listens, it understands. And if it didn't understand, maybe it was never love. Maybe it was just dependency. And breaking free from that is an act of courage, an act of self-love, an act of life. You know you're being used. You know you're being drained. You know that it's no longer love. It's a demand. And still, you keep going. You keep helping. You keep transferring. You keep saying it's okay when everything is wrong. Not because you want to, but because you feel guilty. A guilt no one sees. A guilt that grew slowly over years of trying, silence, and broken promises. Maybe you think, if I stop, he'll suffer. If I say no, she'll pull away. If I don't help, I'll feel like a bad mother, a selfish father. But the one who's truly suffering is you. The one who's being abandoned every day is you. The one who's feeling alone, even while present, is you. Freud would warn us about the power of the superego in this process. That internal voice shaped by years of beliefs, values, and sacrifice that says you must, you have to, you can't fail. But that superego, when unbalanced, becomes a prison, an emotional prison where you stop being a whole person and become just someone useful, and someone who lives only to be useful forgets they also need to be loved. This dilemma is invisible to outsiders. No one sees the mother who cries after the money transfer. No one sees the father who hides the bank statement out of shame. No one sees the tight chest when the phone rings. And the first question isn't, how are you? But, can you help me with this? There's an identity built around usefulness. Many parents believe that if they don't help, they stop being important. If they don't contribute, they stop being loved. If they don't provide, they lose the only connection that remains. And that idea, planted through years of manipulation, becomes truth in the mind, becomes a rule, becomes a belief. But it's a lie that makes you sick, a lie that ages you from the inside out. And then a moment comes, a moment when the silence of the house starts to hurt, less than the weight of manipulation. A moment when the emptiness of distance feels more bearable than the anxiety of constant demands. A moment when the body starts saying what the heart already knew: I can't take this anymore. That's the turning point. It doesn't always come with shouting. It doesn't always come with confrontation. Sometimes it comes as exhaustion, an exhaustion that no longer seeks understanding, just peace, an exhaustion that no longer wants to convince the child to love, just wants to breathe, just wants to exist, without fear, without blackmail, without control. You are not abandoning anyone by protecting yourself. You are not being unfair. You are not failing. You are, finally, remembering that you are also human, that you also have limits, that you also have needs, and that no one, not even a child, has the right to demand everything without giving anything in return. If you feel guilt, look at that guilt with kindness. Understand where it came from, but don't follow it blindly. Guilt often doesn't come from a real mistake. It comes from years of emotional distortion. It comes from a place inside you that still believes love must hurt, but love doesn't have to hurt. Love can be light. Love can be a choice. Love can be healthy distance. You can still love, but you need to be free. Free from guilt, free from blackmail, free from the obligation to support someone who no longer sees you as a parent, but as a source. And when you free yourself from that, you start to hear a new voice. A voice that says, now, yes, now you've started to take care of yourself, and that voice is yours. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a dramatic break. It was a click, a gesture, a simple movement in front of the phone screen or at the bank counter. You typed the password, looked at the balance, took a deep breath, and decided, enough. You closed the joint account, removed your child's name from the card, blocked access, made the last transfer, and for the first time in a long while, you felt like you were doing something for yourself. It may seem small, but it's not. It's huge, because that gesture carries more than a financial change. It carries a shift in awareness. It marks the beginning of a new story. The empty account now also symbolizes a soul that stopped being drained, a heart that chose to preserve what was left, a dignity that could no longer be postponed. Many parents describe this decision as a painful relief. Yes, there's pain, because the bond breaks, because the fear of losing your child tightens, because the mind, conditioned by guilt, still tries to say, maybe you were too harsh, but deep down, something deeper begins to grow. Peace. A peace that comes slowly, but it comes. A peace that lives in the silence of a house no longer interrupted by demands. A peace that shows up in a morning coffee without anxiety, in a bank statement without surprises, in a night without hidden tears. That gesture is, in fact, a new ritual, a new kind of care, no longer the care of sacrifice, but the care of rebuilding. You start remembering what you like, what you feel, what you need. You begin thinking about what you can do with what's left, not just of the money, but of life. And you discover there's still time. There are still paths. There's still room to start again. Freud would speak here about the importance of symbolic separation. Breaking free from a pattern of abuse is often harder than any other separation, because it stirs the unconscious. It touches invisible loyalties. It shakes the belief that to love is to never say enough. But when you say enough with love, you set yourself free. You free yourself. And paradoxically, you also offer the other person a chance to grow, to take responsibility, to mature. Maybe he'll never understand. Maybe he'll criticize. Maybe he'll say you turned your back. But you know you didn't. You just turned the key that opens the door to your autonomy, the key that closes the cycle of exploitation, the key that gives you back the right to exist for yourself, not as support, not as a resource, but as a person. You can still love, but without hurting yourself. You can still wish them well, but without giving up your own well-being. You can still be a father or mother, but with limits, with clarity, with protection, because protecting yourself is also love. And when love begins to include yourself, then yes, something new begins to bloom. Today, maybe you drink your coffee without waiting for that call. Maybe you look at your bank statement and feel at peace. Maybe you walk through the house and realize the silence now is different. It's not abandonment, it's freedom, and that freedom is yours. Earned, deserved, undeniable. Some parents realize it too late. They spent years believing that their child's presence was a sign of affection, that those Sunday visits, those phone calls, that "how are you?" were acts of care. But little by little, they begin to notice a pattern. The conversations always end with numbers. The gestures of affection appear during talks of inheritance, wills, property. And then comes the shock. He wasn't caring. He was investing. There are sons and daughters who stay close, not out of love, but out of expectation. They wait, they calculate, they plan, they maintain the appearance of closeness to ensure they'll be remembered, not in the heart, but in the will. And parents often feel this, but don't want to see it, because seeing it would be too painful. It would mean admitting the bond was an act, that the care was a strategy, that the affection was self-interest. Freud would talk about the unconscious desire to repair the past. Many parents, carrying old guilt, try to make up for what they couldn't give before. And in doing so, they become vulnerable to children who know exactly how to touch that wound. You were never there when I was little. Now is your chance to show you care. And with lines like that, the child begins to take over, starts influencing decisions, moves closer to the assets. There are stories of parents who found out their child was monitoring their finances, talking to lawyers, asking about contracts, not out of concern, but out of strategy. And by the time they realized it, they were already being emotionally led to leave everything to someone who never truly saw them. And that realization hurts deeply. But there's also a strength that is reborn from that recognition. The strength to say, I don't owe anything. I'm not obligated to leave everything. I don't have to reward abuse with an inheritance. And that's where the turning point begins. The decision to revise the will, to change the paperwork, to protect what was earned through so much effort, not out of revenge, but for justice, for respect, for sanity. Many parents, when doing this, feel a wave of guilt at first, as if they're being too harsh. But then, something shifts. The soul breathes, the conscience aligns, the heart understands this choice isn't against the child. It's in favor of one's own story, in favor of one's own dignity. It's an act of emotional preservation. And interestingly, it's at that moment that other truths begin to emerge. Grandchildren who come closer, not for money, but out of genuine affection. Friends who applaud the courage. Neighbors who say, you did the right thing. And most of all, an internal relief. A quiet feeling that, finally, you protected yourself. You don't owe an inheritance to someone who never saw you. You don't have to reward the one who hurt you. You can choose someone who values your story. And if no one seems worthy, you can still choose peace. Because in the end, the greatest legacy you can leave is the example of someone who broke free, who chose with clarity, who refused to repeat the cycle of submission, and who finally lived the last chapters of life with truth, with autonomy, with self-love. She was 76 years old, white hair, slow steps, but a mind still lucid enough to realize she was tired of suffering in silence. Tired of opening the door to a son who only brought spreadsheets of bills, who only showed up to collect, who said he loved her but used the word as currency. One day she made a decision, not out of anger, not out of hatred, but with a firm serenity, almost spiritual. She said to herself, I'm not leaving anything else. Not money, not jewelry, not my heart. I'm leaving for myself what I still have left. She rented a small house, cleared her credit, bought a new armchair, and started over. Started over without the fear of rejection, without the guilt of no longer helping, without the shame of admitting that her own son was a stranger to her story. And in that silence of the new house, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Lightness, peace, presence. This story isn't just hers. It could be yours. It could be your next step, because there comes a time when love isn't enough, when it's not returned, when it hurts, when it erases you. And in that moment, breaking away isn't abandonment. It's salvation. Breaking away is giving yourself another chance. It's telling your own heart, I'm listening to myself now. I respect myself. I'm setting myself free. Freud taught us that the desire to be loved can become a prison, but there comes a point when the instinct for emotional survival speaks louder, when a person, even wounded, chooses to live, not live out of duty, but live with dignity, with autonomy, with courage. And that's how, after cutting ties with the narcissistic son, something unexpected happened. The grandson came back, not for inheritance, not out of interest, but out of affection, out of longing, out of true love. And there, in that new relationship, she found a peace she never had with her son, because sometimes it's in the space created by cutting ties that life blooms again. Maybe you're living this dilemma. Maybe you're still trapped between guilt and fear. But I invite you to think, what if the greatest act of love you can make right now is for yourself? What if the respect you never received could start inside your own heart? You are still worthy of love, of protection, of peace, even if your child doesn't see it, even if the world doesn't understand, because you know how much you've already given. And now, it's time to receive from yourself. If this video touched something inside you, don't ignore it. Reflect, come back if you want. Watch it again. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment. Sometimes writing is also a form of release. And if you feel ready, subscribe to this channel. Here, you will always have a space for care, truth, and rebuilding. You deserve to live your old age with dignity, with freedom, with love, but a love that starts within you, and that no one can take away, ever again.